Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on day one of International Careers Week. We are so excited to have Jen join us today. Jen is an oceanographer with the Ocean Chemistry and Ecosystems Division. Jennifer's research spans climate science, physical oceanography, and coral reef ecology to better understand climate threats to reef ecosystems. She's currently researching the biogeochemical Argo, please excuse my English here, float data applications in the Gulf of Mexico, correlations between satellite data and biogeochemical Argo floats, biogeochemical model analysis, and characterizing open ocean influences on reefs. I'm not even going to try to say the word before that. Thank you, Jen, so much for joining us. And I just want to quickly say thank you to the Blank Family Foundation, Longview Foundation, Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation, and High Stakes Foundation for making these programs possible. Jen, could you please give us some information on how did you get into this career? What is daily life like, and what do you do?
Thanks for the introduction, and thanks for having me. It's really exciting to be talking with all of you today, and hopefully I can provide some insight and motivation to get into ocean science and climate science. I was motivated actually when I was 10 years old. My dad lived in Australia for a little while, and so I got to see the Great Barrier Reef, and I got to see all of the corals and giant clams and fish and all the bright colors underwater in a very clear, beautiful, pristine ocean. And I remember thinking it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And then learning on the boat back to the mainland that it might not be there anymore because of our our warming planet. And at that moment, I decided that I wanted to do something about the state of the ocean, and I wanted to try and protect something like the Great Barrier Reef, and that's what I was going to dedicate my career to. So that was my motivation, and oddly enough, my research later in life brought me back to the Great Barrier Reef.
Amazing. Well, we could
Yeah.
just jump into questions if anyone wants to type in some questions. But Jen, can we start with what is oceanography and how does it help us understand the world's oceans and climate?
Yeah, no problem. So, oceanography, in the most simple sense, is the study of the ocean, right? Um, but the ocean is a big sponge for the atmosphere. And so the ocean collects over 90% of the heat that our planet has. It also collects a lot of our gas. So, from the CO2 emissions that are put into the atmosphere, 30% of those emissions are absorbed into the ocean, which can change the chemistry of the ocean. So, our ocean warming and the gases changing can also change what lives in it. And I mainly study how those things are changing, how we can measure it, and how we can protect it. Um, a important thing to mention there as well is like the role that plankton plays in the ocean. And plankton in SpongeBob is thought of this evil cartoon, but plankton is actually one of the greatest things on Earth because plankton produces a lot of oxygen and stores carbon in our ocean. So, evil SpongeBob plankton should actually not be the villain, in my opinion.
What exactly is plankton?
Plankton. So we have phytoplankton, which uses energy from the sun, like our plants on land, and it takes in CO2 like plants and trees and converts that into oxygen. And plankton is like the grass of the ocean. It's the base of the food web. And from there we have zooplankton, which are animals that eat the phytoplankton, and sometimes they eat each other. So things like copepods, which are, they kind of look like little shrimp. That's a kind of zooplankton in the ocean. So phyto and zooplankton are two kinds of plankton in the ocean.
What is the connection between ocean science and climate change?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, you know, like I said, that the ocean is like a big sponge, right? And helps regulate the gas in the atmosphere. It also moves kind of like the circulatory system in your body. So you can think of Antarctica as being the heart. And there's a lot of cold water masses down there. And then there's a lot of warm water masses in the equator. And the way that the ocean moves is because of those cold and warm masses they're interacting with each other. And so like your hot chocolate sitting out on the kitchen table, um, if you leave it there all day, it'll eventually be the same temperature as the room. And so everything in the ocean and the atmosphere is constantly trying to work towards that equilibrium, or that state of where your hot chocolate gets to the same temperature as a room. So that's how the ocean and the atmosphere work together. And the ocean is a really good indicator of climate change, because we're seeing a lot of warming happening in the ocean, and we're seeing a lot of changes to things like coral reefs, and they are very telltale, obvious signs. Corals can't move. They're living organisms that kind of look like colorful stones. Um, and when there's too much warming, they turn white and they lose their algae that lives in their tissue. That's why they turn white. And then if they're warm for too long, they die. And the rate at which that the coral bleaching, or the corals turning white and then dying, we're seeing more and more of that around the world, and it's really alarming. So the ocean is a really good detector of what is happening to other animals, especially corals. It's a really kind of in your face sign of what's occurring.
What education qualifications do you have, and where did you attend college?
Yeah, that's a great question. I went to University of Hawaii. Um, I really like to surf, and I really like to dive, and my passion for the ocean comes from my love for being in the ocean. And I studied actually marine biology. I worked at an aquarium for 4 years, and then I actually went and studied geography and marine science, because I was more into data science and mapping things, and kind of had a blend of marine bio and physical geography. And then I worked after, in between all the degrees that I did, I actually worked in between. And I thought that was really helpful, because it helped me figure out what I wanted to do. And also, more importantly, what I didn't want to do. And so I would encourage you to go and get work experience in something that you're maybe like, oh, could I do that? I mean, I worked in solar, um, I worked in water quality, and and then I did my master's in San Diego at Scripps, the Institution of Oceanography. And then I did my PhD in England and Australia. So my studies have brought me all over the world and all over the country. And each degree I saw as an opportunity to live somewhere different and cool. And I've been really privileged that I could make that happen.
Amazing. Why is coral important besides an indicator of temperature?
Yeah, coral reefs are really important for a number of reasons. Um, to me, I enjoy recreational activities on coral reefs, so diving, snorkeling, I appreciate them for that. And they also make really good surf breaks. um, but corals are way more important than that. more important than the fun I have on coral reefs. So they actually protect coastlines. The structure of the reef protects communities and beaches from waves and storms. They provide a really important buffer, a natural buffer. They're also thought to be the rainforest of the ocean. They contain more biodiversity than anywhere in the ocean. So, there's so many animals that live there. It's a really special place. And there's a lot of animals that you can't see, like little tiny invertebrates or things like crabs and sea stars and you know, there's lots of micro animals that live amongst the coral polyps and yeah, they're pretty cool too.
What does a day in the life look like when you're out researching?
Yeah, so one of the really incredible things I get to do is I get to go to sea and I get to work on research ships. And so some of these ships kind of look like small cruise ships, but they have laboratories on them. And we can take water samples, we can take sediment samples of the seafloor, we can deploy robots to help collect data, to film things in the deep sea. Um, so being on those research ships is a really special and cool opportunity. I also deploy a lot of instruments that remain in the ocean for a long period of time. Um, and yeah, I study the biology, the chemistry, and the physics of the ocean. And we use a lot of really advanced technology now, a lot of robots or autonomous platforms, things that don't have to have a human in them to study the ocean, which is pretty cool. There's a lot of great technology out there.
How long do you stay on one of these little ships when you go out?
The longest I've been out um, was 3 months, or sorry, 3 weeks. But I will be out this summer for a month and a half. But some of my colleagues spend like half the year on them, but I don't go to sea that much. Um, yeah, and some people that's their full-time job. They're, always working on these ships. I also get to dive occasionally for my career, and scuba diving is a lot of fun, and being connected with the environment that you're studying, I think is really special and important.
Have you ever in any of these dives or research missions encountered a shark or something that was like a scary situation for you?
Yeah, I have. I actually one of the coolest places I've ever been was an archipelago or an island chain in the Indian Ocean, and it's virtually uninhabited, and fishing isn't allowed there. So the coral reefs are really pristine, and they make for a great place to study because there's not a lot of human disturbance. And humans actually make the closer humans are to coral reefs, the worse state they're in. So the ones that are the furthest away are really good to study, and we still disturb them by warming our planet, and we can see effects of that. But while diving on these reefs um, in the Indian Ocean, at a place called Chagos or Diego Garcia, and within 30 seconds, I was surrounded by sharks on every one of those dives. And I think at first I was a bit like, there are a lot of sharks here, and they're all around me. And then later, you realize that they're just curious. They're not acting aggressive. And I think the more I'm in the water and the more I learn about the ocean, the less scary it is. And I realize that anything, even a small little triggerfish or like a triggerfish is how would I describe it? It's kind of like a tropical, fun little looking fish, and they're really cute. even like a small triggerfish, if it's acting aggressive, can be scary. So I very rarely see animals that just, like, dart at you and turn, and, there was one instance where a shark was doing that to me in Chagos, and that was pretty scary, and I got back on the boat. But, I was snorkeling and on the surface, and I think when you're scuba diving, you're a lot more comfortable and you're more aware of what's going on, and I don't know why that shark was doing that, but it just kept, like, darting at me and then turning, darting at me and turning. But, one time in Hawaii, a little triggerfish did that to me, and I was just as scared. I was like, "This fish away from me."
What type of
So,
sharks were these?
mhm, yeah, there were reef sharks and nurse sharks, and, I think we had some Galapagos sharks as well. Um But yeah, it's very rare to see any aggressive behavior in sharks. Like I've been in the ocean a lot. I actually dove with sharks just this past weekend in Florida intentionally. I went on a fun dive. And they're really beautiful and honestly, unless I get this question a lot, unless there's like dead fish in the water, they really could care less about you.
What do you need to understand the technology, or are you focused on the science?
I'm more focused on how to use the technology for the science, and understanding the technology is important. And I work a lot with the technology, but more importantly, I want the data that's coming from that so I can measure changes and things. So I would say both, but you can't have one without the other in what I do right now. So, yeah.
What does your work entail when you are not on a boat?
Yeah, so day to day, I'm reading scientific papers or reports and writing, and I'm analyzing data. So, while like a marine biology career, an oceanography career sounds really glamorous, like you're just playing in the ocean all the time. It's in fact like not not that most of the time. Those are like those are days that are fun but exhausting and a lot of work. But most of my day to day is trying to produce useful science to help forward the field. So my role as a scientist is to contribute to something we didn't know before. And so I'm always working on a question that's new. And that's something that honestly, I think the coolest part of my job is that I can come up with a science question and I can pursue it. And I've been trained on how to answer that question. And I have the freedom to think about it and to bring the people and the technology together to answer scientific questions. And that's really exciting.
What is the most exciting thing that you've discovered so far?
Uh, I mean, my own discoveries are, my research around on the Great Barrier Reef has been pretty cool and exciting. I look at deeper reefs and the impacts of warming on deeper reefs that we can't scuba dive. They're too deep. And so I really like looking at that kind of work because these are areas of the ocean that we still need to explore. And I think there's a lot of cool things in the ocean that, the just ocean exploration is exciting, right? Like landing on the moon. There's parts of the ocean that we still haven't understood well, and things are changing. So I think that for me is kind of like being a pioneer of the ocean and a true explorer. So looking at these deeper reefs and looking at changes to them is something that I really enjoy.
Have you ever thought about doing anything else, or are the oceans your sole interest?
Yeah, sometimes I think about doing something else, but it's not as exciting to me. And, I'm the kind of person that really needs to be passionate about what they're doing, and I put my heart and my identity and everything into what I do. I really love it, and I wouldn't, I feel really lucky that I knew this is what I wanted to do when I was young, and I really tried hard to make it happen. That being said, like there are other opportunities that present themselves, and who knows, like um, I do know that I've gained a lot of really useful skills from becoming a scientist and learning how to do research, and I think I'm confident that I could take that to like other fields if I needed to. And yeah, maybe doing more atmospheric climate science could be really cool, and working on ways to reduce our CO2 emissions, our carbon emissions would be something that I could also see myself doing.
How competitive are positions like yours?
Yeah, they're pretty competitive. I would say, it takes you've got to really care a lot about doing it, because I think I had to go to school for a while to do this, and I had to gain a lot of experiences and network, and I really had to work hard to get here. So yeah, I would say it's pretty competitive. Um, but that being said, everyone in ocean science and climate science doesn't have to be a researcher, and they don't have to be a scientist, and we need effective communicators, we need policymakers, we need lawyers, we need technicians, we need engineers, we need people out on the ships collecting data, we need educators to support everything that's going on. So we need advocates, it's a whole network of people. And I'm just one example of how you could be in this field. But there's so many different options. You could be an artist, you could be a musician and do conservation and ocean science and climate science. So I would encourage everyone, no matter what career they go into, to try and weave it in somehow if you can, be a better steward in in the environment, and bring sustainability with you wherever you go. Try to incorporate it.
You encountered an animal in distress in the field. Would you intervene and help or let nature run its course? Does your work mostly focus on saving ecosystems or animals?
Yeah, more so ecosystems. I study how the environment around the habitat or the ecosystem is changing and how it will affect things. If I saw an animal in distress, I think it depends. It depends what if I could help it, and first of all, being someone that's a diver, the first thing about helping anyone or anything is it going to put you in danger, and if it was going to put my own life in danger or someone else's, I wouldn't help it, because I value my life and my colleagues and my friends and my coworkers over helping an animal. So that would be my first question. You don't want to put yourself in danger if you're going to help an animal, but if you can, yeah, I mean, by all means, help an animal. Um, I'm trying to think of an example where maybe I wouldn't, and I'd let nature run its course, and that's kind of a tricky thing. So, sea lions in California, that's kind of a tricky topic, because sometimes there are a lot of starving baby sea lions on the beach. And I've seen them before, and they're like very weak and frail. And SeaWorld has a rescue program, and they'll come and collect the sea lions. And it's unfortunately sometimes these sea lion pups are dying, and it's a way of balancing their population. And we maybe shouldn't be saving all of them, right? But if you can, if there's a program, it's kind of tricky, and I'm not really sure what the right answer is there. But I did call in and report that one, and SeaWorld came and picked it up. So yeah, I've got a big heart, and I ultimately uh, would would help if I could. Absolutely.
I'm gonna take over Nikki froze, which is why we do
Oh,
this together.
good.
So we
Really
hear a
good.
ton about plastics in the ocean and pollution in the ocean and the big gyres. Have you experienced that? And like, how big of an issue is this really?
Yeah, there it's a huge issue. And microplastics, I mean, are pretty much everywhere now. So, um, it's a hard thing to clean up, as you can imagine. They're massive. And it's not just at the surface, as things break down, they float in the water column. So you've got to think of it as more of like a three-dimensional space. And like there's just not a net big enough. And even if there was, one thing that I've really learned in the ocean is that things like to grow on other things. And so you have entire ecosystems now forming underneath all this trash. And if you scooped it up, you would be scooping up lots of larvae and fish. And it's create anything floating in the ocean. There's usually some fish or algae, or there's something living on under it. Even like here in Florida, we get these large seaweed blooms, and there's actually a lot of life in there. So um, it's really tricky with the plastic. The best thing that we can do is to reduce our own single-use waste. So bring your own water bottle, bring your own cup to the coffee shop, your to-go cup, bring your own bags to the grocery store. Sometimes if you're picking up food at a restaurant, you can bring your own containers, or maybe just eat at the restaurant instead. Reduce your waste however you can. And it helps. You'd be surprised that if you keep doing it and your friends see you do it, you can make a difference. So that's what would be my suggestion.
That's great. I've read a lot of articles about uh, reefs that are created, they're man-made reefs. Have you worked on those, and do they work? Is it something that you're finding to be successful, and how does it work?
Yeah, I haven't done a ton with man-made reefs. But my I would love to just see. I'm more of like a conservation first and then restoration. So I want to protect everything first of all, and I want to keep it as natural as possible. And I have seen a lot of. I'm a scuba diver recreationally, and I dive a lot of shipwrecks. Those are a lot of our man-made reefs here in Florida, and they do attract a lot of fish. They have coral growing on them. There's designated reef like tracks. So there's like shipwrecks all lined in a row, and they're from north to south or south to north, and they're designed so you can go with the current of the Gulf Stream and go one to one if you want. So they're beautiful. I've also dove on old oil rigs that are now reefs. And things, like like I was saying with the plastic, animals love growing on floating things in the ocean or submerged, it's habitat. But my first pick of habitat would always be natural stuff. And we do have to be careful of the materials that we're using for these reefs because, you know, we shouldn't be eating heavy metals, right? And some of these structures have toxins in them. And then they have things like scallops or, you know, fish eating something on there, and maybe they're eating a metal. So there's concerns with the structure that's used to make these reefs. But you know, also that being said, like as coral reefs become more at risk and are dying, unfortunately, looking at solutions like um, planting corals and restoration and all of those things are definitely things that people are studying, and I would encourage everyone to I would encourage them to keep doing so, you know.
That's great. Thank you. So, one of our schools that you mentioned SeaWorld, and it sounds like they are doing some good work as far as saving the sea lions. Um, but how do you feel about some of the rest of the amusement park activities? And I think that maybe Black
Yeah,
Panther came out,
yeah.
really sort of opened the door to some of the controversy that was
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah, you know, I actually had this conversation with my little sister recently. I have a nephew that's 3.5, and she was like, "Should I take him to SeaWorld? I'm not sure." And I watched, you know, um orcas are the top predator of the ocean. They're apex predators, and I think it's been made very clear that they don't belong in captivity, and there's a lot of issues surrounding that. There's also, you know, ones that are already in captivity. You can't just go and release them in the ocean or they'll die. So um, there's kind of like a balance there. Um, SeaWorld does do some really good programs in terms of helping injured animals rehabilitate, like the sea lions or dolphins or sea turtles, some manatees. It's kind of like, you know, aquariums and zoos, right? You can think of it in the same way. Some have programs that are helping injured and animals that would have otherwise been dead. And they, you know, they study them, they give them a nice home. And some places are strictly research, and these animals are helping with research. So those are positive things. SeaWorld also helps a lot of people connect with the ocean that wouldn't have otherwise. And um, I I really want people to care about the ocean, and uh, I don't want animals to be harmed in the process, obviously, but I also want people to care about it. So it's kind of a tricky thing. I ultimately said to my sister, I said, maybe go once, learn about it, see what's going on, and then decide if you want to go back and what you're going to tell people and form your own opinion. Um, so, you know, there's trade-offs to lots of different things, and I'm sorry that's not a yes or a no answer. Um, but you know, you it's good that you're asking questions about it.
So many things are lots of shades of gray, not just
Yes,
black and white.
that's right.
Um, so what is the deepest and maybe the most remote for diving and research that you and your team have explored area?
Yeah. So I personally, well, my deepest scuba diving was in the Blue Hole in Belize, and that was not for research. That was for fun, and no university or job would have ever let me dive that deep. um, so deep diving is not safe. But yeah, so that was 150 feet, and I don't really like diving that deep myself. It was just kind of a one-time thing. But it's a lot safer to use ROVs or a remotely operated vehicle to go down to these deeper reefs and explore them. And yeah, there's a lot of, so the research that I did on the Great Barrier Reef was using a lot of data to quantify the effects of those zones. So I wasn't necessarily down at like, 200 feet myself on the coral reefs. But I actually, if you don't mind, I've got a slide on the floats that I work on, and I can show you
Pleasure.
how deep those go. If I could share my screen, or is
Yeah,
it
let's see
disabled?
here.
And I can show you what those look like.
Ah,
Are we out of time?
no, I think we're good. Nikki, can you
Okay.
help us with Jen being able to share screen?
Done.
Great, thank you. All right.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So this is a photo of a biogeochemical Argo float. And I send these floats down to as deep as 1.25 miles under the ocean. And how they work is that they descend down from the surface. They drift at 1 mile depth, or 1,000 meters. And then on the 10th day, they drop down to 1.25 miles, and they start taking measurements all the way up to the surface. And then they send the data through the satellite network. And so these floats live in the ocean for 5 years. We communicate to them through the satellites, and the floats also communicate with us. And so we have two-way communication, and this is a lot safer than diving. And we're able to collect a lot more data than being on a ship, than scuba diving or anything. So this is the center of my research right now, is working on data from these floats.
Okay, so tell us about the data that you're collecting from these floats.
Sure.
What are you excited about? Yeah. And what do you see?
Yeah. So one thing that I look at here is throughout the water column, there's oxygen data. There's also data on pH, or the acidification of the ocean. And you can think of ocean acidification like if you were to put an egg in vinegar, a hard-boiled egg. You could go home and do this tonight and go see what happens. If you put a hard-boiled egg in vinegar and leave it, the shell will dissolve. And so it's really important for us to study those characteristics in the ocean, because shells are made of the same thing that eggshell is made of. So calcium carbonate is at risk when the ocean becomes more acidic. So that's something that we study using these floats.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. And so these are out for 5 years. So do you have a period of research that goes on for 5 years and then you create a report from that, or are you creating small reports? Tell us a little bit about the lifespan of a research project.
Yeah, so it kind of depends on the question. We try to put as many of these in the ocean as we can. And the goal is, why they profile every 10 days is so we can have them out for 5 years, because we want to look at long-term changes in the ocean. So the climate signal versus like a weather event. But that being said, I've also looked at the data from these floats under hurricanes. And so that was more of a weather signal. So that was on a short term, and that was only one float. Yeah, so a little bit of both, I guess. We kind of try and use as much data as we can to answer as many questions as we can.
That's great. So we have one more question from students, and then I have a final wrap-up question for you. But why
Sure.
is the ocean becoming more acidic?
The ocean is becoming more acidic because we're putting more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And the ocean absorbs 30% of our atmospheric carbon dioxide, which is a lot. And when the ocean absorbs that CO2, it changes the chemistry of the ocean. So if you had one of the coolest experiments I saw was if you had a fish tank, right? And you had a candle in there burning and you closed the air off, the water would absorb that gas in from the candle. If you kind of created your own little fish tank earth. And so that gas is being absorbed into the ocean and it's changing the chemistry of it. And we can measure that and we can see it and we can understand that through other science experiments too. So we really need to get our emissions down. Number one.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. We do. Okay, so our final wrap up is, what advice would you give to students who are interested in pursuing a career in environmental science?
Yeah, I would say, you know, I've met a lot of really good people, a lot of really good mentors, and I would say find people that are doing what you want to do and talk to them. Don't be afraid. And also don't be afraid to challenge yourself. You know, be confident. If I could tell young Jen something, it would have been be confident in your ability to learn and don't doubt yourself. Just go for it. You know, like classes might seem hard and challenging, or you might get stuck on something, but it's actually those challenges that make you strong and that make you learn and you grow. Like you become such a good person if you challenge yourself um, in many ways. And don't be afraid of the challenge. And also um, don't be afraid to go talk to people. You know, I think just like people do want to help and they want to help guide you and they see it as um, like you look up to them, and that's something really nice to hear that someone's interested in what you do. That being said, you know, I'm grateful to be talking to all of you. Also, you know, lots of different job experiences, like I said before, are really helpful to help you figure out what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And you'll figure it out, you know, and enjoy it. It's a journey. And you don't, I also, when I was younger, I just wanted to like be grown up and have my job and, you know, finish this and finish that so I could be in that. And now that I'm grown up and have my job, I'm kind of like, oh man, that was really fun to be in college and to be working at the aquarium and you know, trying different things and figuring it out and enjoy figuring it out. You know, that's part of it.
Mhm. That's really wonderful advice. Well, Jen, thank you so
Uh-huh.
much for taking the time to speak with our Montana students today. I
No
learned a ton,
problem.
and I'm sure they did as well. And best of luck with all of your research.
Thank you. Thanks for having me and best of luck to all of you.
All right. Thank you so
Thanks.
much. Goodbye,
Bye.
everybody.